On Christmas morning, a family was shattered by a gruesome discovery. On December 26, 1996, a ransom demand shook the Ramsey family home in Boulder, Colorado, setting off a chain of events that would captivate and haunt the nation for decades to come. It was the day after Christmas, and 6-year-old JonBenet Ramsey, a child beauty pageant participant, was supposed to be enjoying the holiday with her family. Instead, her mother, Patsy Ramsey, discovered a 2.5-page handwritten ransom note on the stairs. The note demanded $118,000 in exchange for JonBenet's safe return, claiming she was in the hands of a group of individuals who would contact the family again with instructions. The ransom note was unusual, not just for its length and detail, but also because it was written on paper found within the Ramsey home. Patsy immediately called the police, and her husband, John Ramsey, began searching the house. The police were notified, and they started processing the scene, though they were initially under the impression that JonBenet might have been taken by someone she knew, given the nature of the ransom demand and the fact that it was left inside the house. As the Ramseys waited for further instructions from the alleged kidnappers, they cooperated with the police, who began to secure the scene and gather evidence. The family's reactions and interactions were closely observed by the responding officers. Despite the ransom demand, there was an undercurrent of uncertainty. The kidnappers had not made any direct contact, and JonBenet's whereabouts remained unknown. The police were faced with the task of verifying the authenticity of the ransom demand while searching for any sign of JonBenet. The hours ticked by, and the tension within the Ramsey household grew, as did the unease among the investigators, who were struggling to understand the motives behind the ransom demand and the fate of the missing child. As the hours turned into a tense and sleepless night, the search for JonBenet continued within the Ramsey household. On the morning of December 26, 1996, Patsy Ramsey, JonBenet's mother, began to search the house more thoroughly, looking for any sign of her missing daughter. She made her way to the basement, an area that had been briefly checked the night before, but not with the same scrutiny as the rest of the house. It was there, in a room used for storage, that Patsy made a horrific discovery. Upon entering the room, she found JonBenet's body lying on the floor, her small frame covered by a white blanket. The police were immediately notified, and upon their arrival, they secured the scene. The body was discovered around 1:05 p.m. on December 26th. Detective Linda Arnett, one of the first officers to respond to the scene, took charge, ensuring that the area was preserved for forensic analysis. As investigators examined the body, they found signs of a violent death. JonBenet had suffered a severe head wound, and a garrote made from a piece of cord and a broken paintbrush was found near her neck. The initial assessment suggested that the cause of death was asphyxia due to strangulation, associated with a craniocerebral trauma. The ransom note, demanding $118,000, now seemed to be nothing more than a twisted ruse, designed to mislead the family and the police. The discovery of JonBenet's body in the basement raised more questions than it answered. How did her body end up there without anyone in the household noticing? The police now had to re-examine the events of the previous day and the night, looking for any clues that might have been missed. The investigation was about to take a much darker and more complex turn, as the reality of JonBenet's murder sank in, and the search for the killer began in earnest. But as the police started to scrutinize the Ramsey household, a critical question emerged. Was the killer still within the family, or had they managed to escape detection? As the police continued to process the Ramsey household, they began to scrutinize every detail of the family's activities on the night of December 25th and the early hours of December 26th. Investigators conducted extensive interviews with John, Patsy, and Burke Ramsey, as well as the family's friends and acquaintances who had been present at the house that day. The police wanted to understand the family's movements, their interactions, and any potential inconsistencies in their alibis. The Boulder Police Department, led by Detective Linda Arnett, worked tirelessly to reconstruct the events surrounding JonBenet's disappearance and murder. They searched the house from top to bottom, collecting evidence and documenting every room, including the basement where JonBenet's body was found. Forensic experts analyzed the ransom note, the crime